This is The Resilient Life, where we believe that every human will struggle in this life. Our challenge is to struggle well. I'm Ryan Manion. I lost my brother to war, my mom to cancer, and I'm the daughter of a retired Marine. I'm also a wife, mom, author, and president of one of the nation's leading veteran service organizations. Join me and some incredible guests as we explore the value of struggling well through life's inevitable challenges. Welcome to another episode of the Resilient Life podcast. I am excited to welcome my friend today, Rob Jones, to the program. A little bit about Rob. Rob Jones is a Marine Corps veteran, motivational speaker, and Paralympic athlete. In 2010, while serving in Afghanistan, he was severely wounded in action by an improvised explosive device where he lost both of his legs above the knee. Rob has gone on to do some incredible things, incredible physical tasks, and some of them with the Travis Manion Foundation. And we're super excited to talk to him about that and more today. Welcome to the program, Rob.
Hey, Ryan, thanks a lot for having me. I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to be a guest and to talk with you.
Yes, well, we're excited to have you. And, you know, I was trying to think, I've known you. I was trying to think what we first met. And we actually met at a Spartan Leadership Summit for the Travis Manion Foundation. And I think that was like 4 years ago now. It's been a little bit.
Yeah, was it before I ran all the marathons or after? I don't even remember. I think it was before. No, it was after.
It was
I don't remember.
Right after running the marathons. Yeah. So it was,
okay, yeah, 2017, 2018. So a couple years ago.
Yeah. And I remember meeting you and I was so impressed by you. And we had a great conversation and we started talking about the idea of you doing something with TMF and you running with TMF and what led into you actually running 10 9/11 Heroes runs across the country, which was awesome and so inspiring. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. But I want to bring it back to the beginning. Well, first, you grew up in Virginia, graduated Virginia Tech in 2007, but I think it was your junior year that you joined the Marine Corps?
Yeah, so I started college in computer science, and I kind of wasn't doing very well. I wasn't a very good student in college, to be honest with you, and wasn't doing well. I started to feel a little bit like a failure, started feeling isolated, didn't have that many friends. Just kind of had a little bit of a crisis, and serendipitously, a buddy of mine who came from a Marine Corps family had joined the Marine Corps the year before. He had kind of had a similar come to Jesus moment where he wasn't doing too well either. And so he joined the Marine Corps, and I talked to him about that. And he told me that he felt great. He was loving his life now. So I did a little bit of research and read this book called Brotherhood of Heroes about the Battle of Peleliu in World War II. And that book just struck a chord with me. And I think maybe 2-3 days later, I was down at MEPS getting sworn in, signed a contract before I really even told my parents.
Wow. And do you have a background in the military in your family, or was this just something that it was introduced to you from your friend?
Not particularly. My dad was drafted in Vietnam, but he stayed stateside. He didn't go to Vietnam. He never really talked about it a whole lot. I think my grandfather was in the Air Force, didn't really talk about that a whole lot. So I guess, I have relatives that were in the military, but wasn't really something that I knew about until after I had, been in the Marine Corps for a while.
And when you joined, how did your parents feel about that?
Scared. I think my dad's reaction was, I said, "Dad, I joined the Marine Corps," and he said, "Why?" And I think my mom kind of had a similar reaction. It was 2007, so we were in the thick of, or it's 2006, so we were in the thick of war. So I mean, anytime a son tells his parents that he joined the Marine Corps during war, I think they kind of what they're gonna immediately assume is going to happen. You're going to go to war, and there's a chance you're going to get killed.
Right. Absolutely. So you join the Marine Corps, you graduate from Virginia Tech in 2007, and then that following year in 2008, you're in Iraq.
Yeah. So I joined a reserve unit in Roanoke, Virginia, with the intention to finish at Virginia Tech and then apply to OCS and become an officer. But before I got that chance, my reserve unit said they were taking volunteers to deploy to Iraq. And so I was kind of faced with this choice. Do I want to continue the officer route, or do I want to go to war right now? And, I joined the Marine Corps to go to war because all these things I was seeking, like courage, brotherhood, selflessness, the traits that I identified in the Marines of the Battle of Peleliu, I knew that they had gained those traits from going to war. And so that's what I wanted. That's what I was seeking. And so I wanted to go to war as soon as possible. And so I took that opportunity. And we deployed to Habbaniyah.
Yeah. And what was that first deployment like for you? Did you find what you, in those, in the sense of that brotherhood and everything that you were looking for?
In a roundabout way. I mean, it was in 2008, Habbaniyah, while I think in 2006, Habbaniyah was really hot. Kind of at the same time the Battle of Ramadi was going on. But by 2008, it had been mostly pacified. So we spent most of our deployment building Iraqi police stations, because we're a combat engineer unit, building Iraqi police stations and then going around and finding weapons caches that had been buried in the ground. So Al-Qaeda in the area, they had gotten their hands on a lot of munitions from the Iran-Iraq war, buried them throughout Habbaniyah. And so we would get an intelligence tip from a local Iraqi saying we think that there's a cache of these weapons buried in the middle of town somewhere. So we would go out, set security, and me and another engineer would take metal detectors and sweep the entire vacant lot, for example, until we either found the munitions or we decided there wasn't anything there. And so I didn't get to experience combat, but I certainly became part of the brotherhood, and I had, I exemplified courage and selflessness in different ways. And I felt proud when we were on our way back. I felt proud of the job that we had done, because we had contributed to the build phase of the clear, hold, build strategy, in that we were helping the Iraqi police become self-sufficient, and we were helping to make the streets of Habbaniyah a little bit safer, getting rid of these munitions.
Now, on that deployment, was there anyone that you were with that was injured or killed?
Yeah, so there were 2 casualties on our deployment. I didn't know the 2 guys that were killed, but they were the only IED strike of the entire deployment. But they hit a very old IED in Habbaniyah, in a Humvee, and these 2 guys were killed. And it really, by that time, nothing had really been happening. So we kind of started to get a little bit of an expectation that, nothing was going to happen. And then these 2 Marines were killed, and that kind of brought us back to earth. In that, there may not be much going on right now, but there's still IEDs out there, and anything can happen at any moment.
And you get back from that deployment, and when you get back, because I've heard, the daughter of a Marine, the sister of a Marine, I'm around a lot of Marines, and, and I know that a lot of men and women that were coming back, they felt disconnected from, they wanted to get back. They wanted to get back in the fight. They want to be back being a part of the solution in Iraq and Afghanistan. Did you feel that itch when you got back, or did you feel like you've been satisfied with that deployment? And, were you looking for what came next?
No, I didn't feel satisfied. I mean, as much as I was proud of what we had done, I didn't experience the combat. And that, when you're a Marine, that's what you want to do. You want to go kill some bad guys. You want to get into some fights. And so, shortly after we got back, my unit announced that they were sending a volunteer platoon to Afghanistan. And me and a couple other guys that I went to Iraq with, we pushed, we immediately signed up for the Afghanistan deployment, because we knew that the fighting had kind of moved from Iraq at that point to Afghanistan.
Mhm.
And so that's where we wanted to go. That's where we knew the fighting was going to be, because we wanted to go kill some bad guys like any good Marine does.
Right. So let's talk about that deployment to Afghanistan and specifically the day you were injured. And that was in 2010. What was the date of your injury?
It was July 22nd.
July 22nd. So walk us through that day.
So my specialty in Afghanistan, because I had the metal detector, and combat engineers historically are trained in obstacle clearance and mine field placement and defeat, we kind of naturally had the job of IED detection. And so the way that would work is anytime that a patrol that we were with felt like there was a likelihood that there was going to be an IED in a certain spot, they would send the combat engineer with a metal detector through there first, and that combat engineer would mark a path, a safe path through that area, and then everybody else would traverse through the area following that path, and then we'd continue on. So the best example of this would be crossing a bridge. So if we were going to go north and there's a big river, we're not going to swim across it in 80 pounds of gear. The Taliban knows that we're going to have to use the bridge, and so they put their limited number of IEDs that they have on the other side of that bridge. So that's how we would kind of know that it was likely that there was going to be an IED there. So a choke point, and then anytime there was one IED strike, there was likely there was going to be 2 or 3 more. So secondary and tertiary IEDs would be the other big indicator. Any kind of choke point are in that situation. So on that particular day, we were doing a push into Taliban territory. So we were basically just walking, I think, northwest of our position and seizing compounds as we went. And if the Taliban shot at us, we'd shoot back and kill them, or they'd retreat or whatever. And we were, planning to go to a certain longitude and latitude, and then stop, and then kind of refit. And around 1 o'clock, we took a break. My squad that I was with took a break, and when we stood up, the point man actually stepped on an IED. And luckily for all of us, the IED that he stepped on, it malfunctioned. And so it did what's called a low order detonation. So just the blast cap exploded. And the blasting cap is this kind of half of a pen size cylinder of explosives that's inserted into this jug of homemade explosives that's a much bigger charge. So it's kind of just like a little firecracker went off underneath his foot. And he was uninjured. But like I said, anytime there's one IED, there's likely to be 2 or 3. And so it became my job to guide us through that danger area now. And so I grabbed my metal detector and I started making my way through. And, 1 second I am swinging my metal detector back and forth, listening for indicators from the metal detector. The next second, in a split, it's like I was teleported onto my back, screaming, and kind of, I had tunnel vision. All I could hear was like a loud ringing in my screams. All I could see was that tunnel vision leading up to the sky, and all I could smell and taste was like this dusty smell of like explosive kind of have a unique chemical stench that is kind of hard to describe, but it's kind of chemically smell. So I could smell that and dust, and then my legs felt like they had fallen asleep. When you fall asleep on your arm,
Mm-hmm.
and it goes to sleep and it kind of hurts because you've been on it for so long. Kind of felt like that, except magnified by about 100 times or something like that. And from there, I was unconscious for about 20 seconds, woke up, and then my fellow Marines were telling me it was going to be good. They had to sweep to me because there might be a 3rd or 4th IED there. So they had to get another engineer over to make his way to me. And then, they got to me, put the tourniquets on, put me on a stretcher, loaded me into a tank. The tank met a helicopter, and I was CAS-evac'd out of there.
And do you know, this is a silly question, but do you know at that point the extent of your injuries? Do you know, are you just in shock, or do you actually know what's happened to your legs?
For the first 20 seconds after I woke up, it was kind of like my mind had disconnected from my body. Mm-hmm. So I was experiencing my body's reactions, the screaming and all this stuff, to the IED strike, but I wasn't telling it, I wasn't saying, body, inhale and exhale, inhale and exhale. I was just kind of doing it on its own. So I think my mind had kind of shut itself off from that. But after 20, 30 seconds of that, the endorphins or, whatever hormones get released into your body to get control of yourself. Those got released, and I started to get my senses back. And at that point, that's when I kind of was able to start thinking a little bit clearer. I knew, I could feel my legs were damaged. I didn't know to what extent. I looked at my hands. Everybody probably does this. They look at their hands first, and every man next will check their groin to make sure everything is connected. And you kind of go just down lower and lower. Right. And I sat up to check my legs, but I got about 2/3 of the way up, and I decided against looking any further because I was afraid that I was feeling okay, for having your legs blown off and having a shot of morphine in me. I felt like if I sat up and I looked, it was going to be like when you were a kid and you skin your knee and it doesn't hurt until you look at it.
Right.
I was afraid I was going to revert to that. So I just decided to sit up and I just laid back instead. I didn't look. But then I asked my fellow Marines there with me, is my injury above or below the knee? And they told me it was below the knee at the time. At the site of injury, they said it was below the knee. But what happens with amputations that are caused by IEDs is that dust and dirt and bacteria and grime gets into the injury. And a lot of the times the doctors have to amputate higher because to save your life from the infection that results from that. Or I don't know what the case was for me, but the IED could have shredded my below the knee body parts so much that there wasn't going to be really any feasible tissue to attach a prosthetic socket to.
Right.
So the orthopedic surgeon kind of takes that into account, and they say, all right, well, there's nothing here to attach a prosthetic, so he's probably going to be better off if we amputate above the knee. I don't know what the case was, but ultimately I became above the knee.
And so where are you taken from Afghanistan? Are you taken to Germany?
Yeah, so I went site of injury to Camp Leatherneck to Bagram Air Force Base, still in Afghanistan, to Landstuhl in Germany, and then to Bethesda, Maryland, which is where all Navy and Marines will go first. And then after you recover and you kind of get stabilized, then you get sent to generally Walter Reed or Balboa or BAMC. Or if your injury isn't as like an amputation, you can go to VA hospitals wherever you want.
Right. So when is the first time that you talk to your parents?
The first time I talked to my parents was when they were bringing me. I got to Bethesda, and they load you up into these really giant ambulances because they have 4 or 5 guys that they're bringing in on stretchers. And so it was probably an ambulance. It was about half the size of a tractor trailer. Mm-hmm. And they bring that thing in, and there's doctors and nurses all waiting for you at the entrance to the hospital to come and get you in really quickly. But they tell your parents and your family and your friends that you're going to be coming on this ambulance at this time, so they can kind of line up outside and greet you. Yeah, greet. You're much too high to really have much of a conversation. But all I remember from that moment, wheeled down, and my mom, my stepdad, and my dad being there and saying, we're here, and then but they kind of wheeled me off, and that's really the only chance they got to talk. And then the next time I remember anybody was when I was in the ICU, and it's just at this point most people have very vague memories because there's so much Dilaudid and morphine and all these other things going through your body that it's just like flashes of memories.
So when you get to Germany, is the purpose there in Germany just to get you stabilized, to be able to get you back to the States? I mean, there's no amputation taking place there, is there? Or is it, we're just going to get him to the place where you can get him back?
There can be. I think they did my first revision in Bagram.
Oh, okay.
They certainly have surgical suites. They started amputating on me rather quickly. I think when you get to Germany, the idea is to get you stabilized and wait for the next aircraft over. I was only there for 12 hours.
Oh, wow.
Generally you're not supposed to wake up or anything. I woke up very briefly. But they'll amputate. I don't think it's out of the question for them to amputate if they need to, or to do a revision if they need to. But I think the idea is to get you back to Bethesda as quickly as possible.
And so what is the first time, again, you're on a lot of different drugs to keep you stable, to keep you pain-free. Do you remember the first time that you are cognizant enough to fully understand what has just happened?
Yeah, I mean, I understood it to some degree at the site of injury. I knew my legs were going to be gone. And then further on in Germany, my squad leader, I just so happened to be there for his own injuries that were minor injuries. And he kind of gave me a little bit more details. Hey, you're double above the amputee, and your buddy Daniel was hit an hour before you. He's still alive. And then I don't think I realized, I guess I probably didn't really have clear cognizance until after I was out of the ICU, which was about a week. So it took me 5 days to get to Bethesda, and then I was in the ICU for a week. And I knew that I'd been injured. I knew that I was missing my body parts, but I wasn't really thinking clearly until after I got out of the ICU. It's about 12 days afterwards, probably. And at that point, that's when I was able to, kind of look down and see and start to move my legs around, my limbs around. And it kind of, I guess I was told that I was a double above knee amputee before, but I hadn't totally understood it completely, if that makes sense. And then once I was able to start thinking clear, that's when I kind of was able to process it.
And so what's that moment like for you where you actually look down and you see, the extent of your injuries? You see that your legs are gone. What's the first thing that goes through your head at that point?
Yeah, so it's actually at site of injury. The first thing that went through my head was that I was going to be in a chair for the rest of my life. I was going to have my mom looking after me for the rest of my life. I figured I was going to be basically helpless for the rest of my life. A very naive and misinformed outlook on what life as a double above knee amputee and life in a wheelchair would be like. And so at that point, kind of high on morphine and in shock, I was asking every Marine around me just to finish me off. Just put a bullet through me and end it now. And obviously they said no. And obviously I'm glad that they said no. But by the time I woke up in the ICU and then kind of got my senses back in the ward, I had accepted it. I don't know if I processed unconscious, but I had accepted it, and I knew that I needed to move on with my life because I was alive. I woke up and I recognized that my heart was still beating, my lungs were still breathing, my brain was still thinking, and they were going to continue to do that now. And so I wasn't going to die, so I needed to make the most of my life. And I'm saying this in retrospect, but I think these are kind of the unconscious thoughts unconscious realizations that I was having. And yeah, it's certainly a strange feeling to look down and see that, parts of your body are missing. But I suppose I just have a really uncanny knack for being able to accept situations quite quickly, process them, and move on. And so it kind of just became normal for me almost immediately, it feels like.
So you leave Bethesda, you show up at Walter Reed, and I will say this, fortunately or fortunately, I know a lot of men and women who have suffered from IEDs and, use prosthetics to get around. And I think that our military does a fantastic job of just saying, okay, this is what comes next. Here's your prosthetic. How you get walking. Here's how you get going. And it seems like you followed that same path when you got to Walter Reed. It was just, let's get you fitted. And they didn't really give you the opportunity to even have the thoughts about, I'm just going to be in a wheelchair for the rest of my life. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly the opportunity to have those thoughts, but I think one thing that the military recognizes is that it's soldiers, it's Marines, etc. They need a mission, and they give you that mission is there immediately. Your new mission is recover. Should you choose to accept it, your new mission is you're going to recover now, and they already had the infrastructure in place. Now, maybe in 2003, 2001, it took a little bit more time for people to get in, but by 2010, that system had been in place for a long time. It was very streamlined. And on top of that, there were hundreds of amputees and other people that had been injured in the clinic going in there every single day. So guys that had been there for a year and a half before me too, and guys that had just gotten there. So I had the opportunity to just look around the clinic, and I could see all of these people that had been there. So I could just basically just looking into my future. I could look over there and see a guy that had been there for 3 months. Okay, that's what I'm going to be doing in 3 months. That's what I'm going to be doing in a year. That's what I'm going to be doing in a year and a half. And so having us all there, that camaraderie, that brotherhood, that helps you, well, that helped me continue, or just recognize that, there was a future, and this is what it's going to look like if I chose to work hard enough.
Yeah, I'd have to imagine that brotherhood that's happening at Walter Reed, and I've been there several times and visited a lot of service members that had catastrophic injuries, and you walk into the PT clinics there, and it's just a bunch of people that are looking at their new normal, and you can really kind of feel that brotherhood in the room when they're all working together, and I know what you're saying about seeing people in the different phases. One of the things that you did is you started to have a natural inclination to rowing, and you're biking, you're setting challenges for yourself, biking, running, rowing. When do you get to the point that, because it's one thing to go through an injury like this and to say, I'm going to walk again, right? I'm going to walk on these prosthetics. And I would think for many people that just getting to that point is a, first of all, incredible accomplishment. And so when do you decide that your next mission is going to go beyond just walking? You start to get into biking, you start to get into running, you start to get into rowing. And, I'd have to think that for most people suffering that sort of injury and just being able to get back up and using prosthetics, I mean, that's accomplishment enough. You decide that you're going to go farther, that you're actually going to set your sights on like athletic endeavors, which is essentially what you did.
Yeah. So early on in my recovery at Walter Reed, I was trying to find new ways that I could work out, get into the gym, do a really hard workout, because I really liked doing that before my injury. And that led me to kind of start researching disabled sports, sports that disabled people did. And that led me to find out about the Paralympics. And then that kind of led me to realize that rowing is a sport called para-rowing in the Paralympics. And so I remember that rowing was a tough workout. And so at that time, I kind of thought, well, maybe the Paralympics could be in my future someday. I had always been kind of fascinated with the life of an athlete, with the dedication to one task and going to the Olympics and that kind of thing. So it always interested me. So I kind of saw it as an opportunity to live that kind of lifestyle that I wasn't going to have before. And so, by a year and a half later, I had learned how to walk and do all these things, and it came time for me to retire. And I learned how to row. I decided that I liked it. I found a rowing partner, which I needed to go to the Paralympics in 2012. And we had agreed that we both wanted to, put forth the effort and the dedication that was going to take to make it there. And so we moved down to Florida, to Orlando, and started training.
And was your rowing partner a veteran as well?
No, my rowing partner, Oksana, she is also a double abundant amputee as a result of birth defects. She was actually in an orphanage in Ukraine and was adopted by her mother. She's somebody that you should have on the podcast, actually. But she was adopted by her mother and brought over here. And it just so happened that our coaches knew each other. And her legs had been amputated, when she was younger. And she had been rowing for a lot longer than me. But our coaches knew each other and thought we might work well as a rowing team.
And so what was that like? I mean, I have to imagine that, this is a year after your injury. You're now living in Florida training to row in the Paralympics. I mean, the shift that your life has taken in 365 days is beyond. What does that look like? What's the training that you're going through? And are you thinking at the time, again, we're talking about all of these incredible challenges that are put in front of you, and you're just knocking them down, you're slaying them, and you're going on to the next one. But talk to us a little bit about the moments of weakness you had, because I think it's important for people to understand that this just did not all come as easily as it looks when you Google Rob Jones on Wikipedia. There were definitely steps along the way. And what, over the course of that year, talk to us about the biggest challenges that you had leading up to that, moving to Florida.
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, somehow I have this natural ability to accept a situation quickly. So I would say I had less psychological battles than most people have. And maybe that's why I was able to kind of do these, kind of quickly turn it around and do these physical feats, was because I wasn't using energy on the 5 stages of grief. I kind of skipped to the last stage. That doesn't mean that there wasn't a level of frustration from time to time that did arise when I failed to do something, when I couldn't do something that I wanted to do. It would be frustrating, and I would have to recenter myself and recognize that the reason that I can't do this is because I just had this big injury. And yeah, so there were times of frustration, but they were very brief when they did happen. Because like I said, I kind of quickly recognized, all right, well, the reason you can't do this is because you don't have legs right now. And so you just have to work harder and practice and learn how to use these legs. And then you'll be able to do this later when you try. And, just get help for now, and be fine with getting help from somebody, because these people want to help you. And yeah, I think that answers the question.
Yeah, you answered the question.
But besides that, the physical stuff, it just took daily work. I mean, I went into the clinic. I started about an hour a day, and then by the time I retired, I was in there for 5-6 hours a day. And so, it just took a lot of grueling work, a lot of trial and error, a lot of being embarrassed from falling down, and a lot of, checking my ego and these kinds of things that everybody needs to do when they're learning something new, and they're trying to be the best that they can be at something. You have to be willing to put yourself out there. You have to be willing to be embarrassed in front of a room full of hundreds of people all looking at you. And every time somebody fell down, like every single head in the whole room looked at you to see what you were going to do. And all you just got back up and you continued walking. Because everybody in that room had fallen down at least once.
Exactly. And so you end up training. You're training with Oksana, and you guys have a pretty awesome rowing career together, while a little bit short-lived. And I think it's because you probably wanted to jump on to the next thing in front of you. But I'm looking, you guys, let's see, you took home the bronze in the Paralympics in 2012. Is that right? So
Correct.
2 years later, and then you continued, and in 2013, you placed 4th in the World Rowing Championships. I mean, that's pretty
correct.
Cool. And then you decide that thought in your head about riding your bike across the country, you're going to do that next. So yeah. You ride your bike across the country. You do this ride was 5,180 miles long. And
Mm-hmm.
is there a lot of solitude in that ride? Is there a lot of time for you to think? Tell us about it.
Yeah, there's a lot of solitude because I did it by myself. I had my it was just me and my little brother. He was driving. I had bought this U-Haul, a 17-foot U-Haul truck that had maybe 250,000 miles on it. And I didn't know. I didn't even know if it was going to make it the remaining 5,000 miles that it needed to go. But yeah, I mean, and we started in Bar Harbor, and I would ride 30, 35 miles a day, Bar Harbor, Maine. And I rode down to Virginia, down just north of Richmond, Virginia, and then I rode west to San Francisco, and then down the coast to Camp Pendleton. And it was during the winter time of the winter of the polar vortex in 2013. And yeah, and so there weren't a whole lot of other people out there riding with me. There were from time to time, but it was mostly 99%, 98%. Just by myself with my brother in the truck behind me. So there's a lot of solitude. And I wish I had the energy and the mental capacity to do a lot of thinking and self-reflection on the bike. But usually I was just focusing on not falling off the bike and trying to get into the right gear for the next hill. So I can't say I did a whole lot of self-reflection on the bike. It all kind of happens, after the fact when I have, look back on it and have time to think. But in the moment, my mental capacity is on the actual thing that I'm doing usually.
In the moment, you're cold and you don't want to fall. And
yeah, exactly. I'm wondering when I keep checking, when I can be done for the day. Like, what's my mileage now, so I can knock off for the day, and what am I going to eat tonight?
And so I love the chronological order of the way you put these physical feats in front of you. So it's like, all right, rowing Paralympian, check. Ride my bike across the country, check. 31 marathons in 31 days in 31 cities. Oh, by the way, this is all consecutive. And This is not just in the United States, it's in the UK, Canada, and the US. Who comes up with that idea? I mean, crazy.
Well, it was I came up with that idea because it was kind of just a recreation or a different perspective on other people that had done similar things. So when I was in therapy learning how to ride a bike, one of the things I did to kind of keep myself motivated was I read about endurance athletes. I became very fascinated with endurance athletes, people that did the race across America or walked to the South Pole or ran ultra marathons and things like this. And it just really fascinated me. And part of the reason that I stopped rowing too was because it just something that just didn't feel right when I was rowing. I didn't feel, because I joined the Marine Corps to exemplify courage, brotherhood, and selflessness. And as much as I enjoyed rowing, it was a very important part of my recovery. It was mostly about me winning a race. Felt great to represent my country and all these things, but it was more about me winning the race and getting the medal. Mm-hmm. And so that didn't feel right. And so that's kind of why I started to do that. That's why I did the bike ride. And I created Rob Jones' Journey, was because I wanted to have a selfless purpose, but at the same time have this physical endeavor to go after, because that's something that really I enjoy, and it pushes me and I learn from it. And so after the bike ride, I actually tried to make the Paralympics again in 2016 in triathlon, but I didn't make it for a variety of reasons, because I was trying to compete in a higher category than I should have been. But after that failure, during the course of the training for triathlon, I kind of reconnected with this natural ability that I had for running. I'd always been a pretty good runner, and I was able to get down to an 18-minute 5K, which is maxing out the Marine Corps PFT for the run.
Pre-injury.
No, post-injury.
Post-injury.
Yeah. while I was training for triathlon. That's when I was able to do it. But I was only running like twice a week. So I kind of rediscovered this natural ability for running. And also, kind of serendipitously during the course of my training, I decided to break it up a little bit by running the Marine Corps Marathon, kind of on a whim. And when I ran my first one in 2015, I didn't do any running besides, I'd never run over 5 kilometers as an amputee.
Mm-hmm.
So I just kind of did it on a whim. I, finished it in 4 hours and 12 minutes, and my whole body cramped up by the end of it. But
Time for doing.
so I kind of, yeah. So I had rediscovered that interest and talent for running. I determined that I could run a marathon, and I kind of enjoyed running a marathon. And so after I was done with triathlon, after that failure, I was kind of thinking, well, what am I going to do next? And, I had heard, again, serendipitously about this guy, the Iron Cowboy, who was doing 50 Ironmans in 50 states in 50 days. And so, I just kind of remembered that. And I thought, well, what if I did my own little spin on that? And so I determined 31 marathons in 31 days in 31 cities. Also because I noticed on the bike ride, my path kind of took me mostly through small towns.
Mm-hmm.
And so I felt like if I was going to do another fundraiser, it'd probably be better if I did each event in a big city to get as many eyeballs on it as I could. So that's kind of how I came up with the idea.
And important to note that everything you're doing, from your bike ride to running 31 miles, like, not only were you doing it to challenge yourself, but you were also raising money for incredible causes that support our nation's military and first responder communities. So, and I'm not talking $5,000-$10,000. I'm talking hundreds and thousands of dollars that you have raised. It's pretty incredible. So you get into, this is not me and my brother are going to run, he's going to support me. You have to put together a pretty big team to help you accomplish this mission.
Yeah.
Do you ever get to a point in those 31 days that you think, oh my God, what did I get myself into? Like, or are you just cruising by like, I'm loving this?
I mean, I wouldn't say I loved it. It was a grind, and it was very repetitive. But my thought process when I started was, okay, I'm going to run the one in London, my first one, and that's going to be my fastest one. And then by the time I get to the 31st one, I'm going to be like crawling across the finish line like a guy, emerging from the desert, that kind of thing. And I'm just going to barely finish and like reach my fingertips out and cross the finish line like that.
Yeah.
That's what I figured it was going to be. I was just going to deteriorate up until that point. And I kind of followed that same pattern for the first 4 days until around, I guess, Boston, maybe Toronto, Detroit, somewhere in there. And I noticed my times were actually I was getting a little bit faster after that 5th or 6th marathon. And that trend kind of continued all the way to Chicago, and Chicago was my 10th one. It was my fastest marathon. And then, so I kind of recognized that my body was actually starting to adapt, and it was actually starting to feel, pretty decent. And that trend continued all the way out to Seattle and down to Los Angeles, and all the way out to Texas. And when in Texas, I hit this really big heat wave in Houston and San Antonio, then Houston, then Dallas. Like, it was really hot in all 3 of those places back to back to back. And one of my kryptonites is humid heat. Mm-hmm. And the reason that it hurts me a lot is because, as an amputee, I don't have the capacity to dissipate heat as much. And then my legs are also encased in prosthetic sockets, so half my body isn't sweating, basically.
Right.
And then all that kind of mugginess inside the prosthetic socket and the friction kind of starts to rub on the skin. And so I left those 3 cities with kind of these blisters that started to form on the outside of my stumps. And I wasn't really able to. I had this system in place before that where I was constantly putting chamois cream on them, drying them off, taking little breaks. But after that, those 3 kind of put me over the edge that I wasn't going to be able to go back the other way and let those heal. They were just going to kind of maintain or get a little bit worse throughout the rest of the time. And so that was the first point where when I got up to go run in the morning, I was like, okay, here we go. I had to kind of start to really do some self-talk. And then when I got all the way to Nashville, in Nashville, I injured my back because I slipped on a wooden bridge and I fell really hard on my butt. And I finished that marathon feeling fine. But then when I woke up the next day in Atlanta, my 4th to last marathon, I woke up and my back was it was killing me. I could barely sit up. And so at that point, I didn't know what to think. All I knew was I just had to get up and get out of the RV and just see what was up. And so I put my legs on and get out of the RV, and there's probably 100, 150 people standing outside the RV, just waiting to greet me and run with me. Not all of them, but a lot of them were going to run with me. And so at that point, I just, I kind of made the decision, regardless of how bad my back hurts, I'm just going to have to withstand the sharp pain that shot up the middle of my back every time I landed on my right foot. And I was going to have to do that about 80,000 more times. And, but I was doing it because, the reason I did the marathons was because I was trying to create a positive story about a veteran that experienced trauma and came back and thrived from it and became stronger from it. And if I didn't finish that, if I didn't finish the story, if I didn't do the last one, yeah, it'd be impressive, but it wouldn't be as powerful. And so I just had to do it, and I had to endure.
And what was the last marathon that you did as part of that journey?
The last one was Washington, D.C.
Oh, was it?
It wasn't, and so none of my marathons, I should specify, none of the marathons I did were sanctioned. It was just me. So, for example, in D.C., we parked our RV right next to the Lincoln Memorial, and I walked out, and I did loops of that section between the Lincoln Memorial and the World War II Memorial.
Okay.
And so I just kind of did loops around that section until I got to 26 miles, 26.2 miles. And it was incredible. I was doing it there were guys from Afghanistan there were guys from Iraq there. There were some of my nurses were there. I had my physical therapist there. My family was there. Friends were there. And everybody was seeing me complete this incredible journey. My wife had been there. My wife Pam had been there the whole time I couldn't have done it without her. She was running the whole operation. All I did was just run my body. And my mom was my massage therapist in the RV. And so she was there for the whole thing too. So I was doing it in front of them and completing the story and kind of showing everybody that they'd probably already recognized this before, but I'm good. You don't have to worry about me anymore. And that was the finish line. And then we just kind of had a little get together that night. The Commandant of the Marine Corps called me and said congratulations. Went on Fox and Friends the next day and Megyn Kelly the next day. And yeah, it was really cool. I got to talk to Joe Biden about veterans and about my thing, because we both happened to be on Megyn Kelly at the same show.
Huh?
And yeah, people still come up to me from time to time, and like I was driving around. My wife and I were going out to breakfast yesterday, and I was at a stop sign, and somebody saw me through the front glass of my windshield and said, aren't you Rob Jones? You ran all those marathons. And so the story is why I did it, and the story is still out there. And I always tell people I don't care. I don't care if somebody remembers my name for being done it. All I care about is that people say, hey, you remember that guy that ran 31 marathons in 31 days that time? And the other person goes, yeah, I remember that. What was that? What was his name? And the original person says, I don't remember either, but I know that he was a Marine. And that's all I care about.
Yeah, I think, it's your story represents what's possible and capable for this generation of warfighters that don't all come back the way they left, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to live fulfilling lives and overcome despite the challenges that are put in front of them. And I think you're an incredible example of that. You know, I don't know if you remember, but this past October, you ran by me in the Marine Corps Marathon. I think it was, we were at like Fells Point. I think we were like going out, and it was right when it had started like torrentially downpouring. I was actually feeling pretty good. I was kind of laughing, and I was running with one of my best friends who had never run a marathon before. And she was massively in her head. And you know, and I'm trying to videotape. I'm like, let's go on Facebook Live. And she's like, turn the camera off. This is BS. Like, I don't know why I let you talk me into these things. Now look at, you know, I mean, she was place. And you came up, and I mean, you scorched us, but I'm like, Rob, you know, and you just had the biggest smile on your face, and you're like, hey, and we took a selfie together, and you know, we talked for a couple minutes, and then you left us in the dust. But I remember turning to her, and like her whole demeanor had changed. And she was very familiar with you through running the 9/11 Heroes runs with us. So she knew who you were. And, you know, it was one of those things where just, it was that needed perspective. And I think, you know, the 31 marathons in 31 days, I think you probably provided that for more people than you can even imagine. And so it's so incredibly powerful. I want to talk to you about your personal mantra, and I'd love you to explain what this mantra means to you and others. And it's called Use the Weight. You've actually done a TED Talk on it. And just give us a brief synopsis of what that means and why that's your personal motto.
Yeah, it's a way to look at things. It's a different way to look at challenges and stresses in life, because if you're alive, you're going to be facing unexpected challenges, unexpected stresses, unexpected difficulties. And so when those things arrive, it's a lot like having a weight. It's like a lot like having a barbell on your shoulders when you're in the gym. The barbell is there whether you like it or not, and it's heavy, and you're not sure if you can lift it. And so at that point you have two options. The first option is you can simply sit there and resist the weight and hold on to it for as long as you can. But eventually, as you do that, you can resist the weight, resist the difficulties, resist the stress for as long as you can. But over time, you realize that your energy is finite. Your energy to hold that weight or resist that weight and those stresses is finite. And so it starts to weigh you down, and more and more and more, until eventually you get to a point where you can't hold it up anymore and you fall on your face. And that weight that stress is pinned across your back. It's holding you down. You can't move it. You can't do anything. You can't help yourself. You can't help anybody. You can't do anything. Or your other option is when that weight, the stresses get on your shoulders, you strict press the weight over your head and you use it, and you do it again and again and again. And every time you lift that weight, your body adapts to it just a little bit, but it adapts to it more and more. And as you keep doing that, as you keep using that weight or that stress or that challenge, you start to adapt to it. Now, because you adapted to that original weight, now you can lift even more weight. You can handle bigger stresses, bigger challenges, bigger difficulties. And eventually it gets to a point where there's not enough weight in that gym. There's not a stress big enough in the world, a challenge that you can't face and defeat. And so you have to go out and you have to actually go create the weight. You have to be like Bruce Willis in Unbreakable, and you have to put paint cans on the end of the barbell because you ran out of weights. You have to go out and find ways to make your life more difficult, more challenging, and create challenges for yourself so that you can continue to grow. And that's it. That's use the weight. And I also have another part of that now too that I've been thinking about, where sometimes we get into a situation where the original weight that's on our shoulders, or the difficulty is it's too challenging. We can't lift it, so we don't know how to use it, or we can't use it yet. And so that's where you have in the gym, a lot of the times you have a spotter. You have somebody that helps you. And when you're lifting, like when you're doing a heavy bench press and you get stuck maybe 2/3 of the way up, your spotter, they don't just grab it and lift it off of you. What do? They put the one finger, they put one finger under the bar, and that's it. And that one finger is all you need to finish the lift. And the whole time they're just going, it's all you, bro, all you, bro. And
True.
and sometimes that's what we need. And that person that's spotting you. So a lot of the times people feel they let their pride or their ego get in the way of asking for that help, of asking for that spot when they need it, because they feel like they don't want to be a burden. Oh, this guy's working out over there, I don't want to bother him. But your friends and your family, I mean, from my personal experience, I love being able to help a friend or a family member or a brother. I love it when somebody asks me for advice or somebody says, would you mind helping me do this thing? You know, I love it. And it makes me feel good. And so I think we need to remember that too, is that when you ask help for somebody, these people that love you, these people in your life that care about you, they want to help you. It's not a burden on them. So remember that when you do recognize that you need a spot, you're not afraid to ask for it. And so that's the mantra.
I love that, the spotter. And it's so true. They put that one finger and you're like, all right, well, someone's helping me, you know, and really the finger's just touching the bar.
Yeah.
I love that analogy. That's awesome. Let's talk briefly about what you've dove into just recently, which is the world of politics. And you just recently put a run in for Congress. You lost in a really heavily contested primary, but you finished really strong. We were rooting you on from over here in Pennsylvania. But what made you decide to take that leap? Because it's a scary one. You know, I'm an elected official in my hometown. I've served for about 9 years. And, you know, people often ask me, when are you going to take the next step? And I'm like, I don't want to take the next step because it's in our world today, it's so divisive and, you know, and it's scary. And I wonder what made you, I mean, right now, pre-running for Congress, you were Rob Jones' beloved Paralympian. And, you know, as soon as you say I'm running for Congress, you automatically have enemies. I mean, it doesn't matter. And so tell us about that experience. And I'd love to know, is that it? Or is there more?
It was a difficult transition because I was used to being a guy that everybody rooted for. Everybody wanted me to succeed in everything that I did because what I was doing was pure. And then, when you start running for politics, pretty much 50% of people don't like you now. And it's good that we talk about it briefly because it was a very brief attempt. But the reason that I did it was because over and over, all the way, from before 2016, really, but more in 2016 after that election, people I just kept hearing over and over, oh, I can't believe this is the best we can do. This is the best we can do. There's 300 million people in this country. This is the best we can do. And I just, I didn't really, I thought about it in 2016, but I was already on my way to the month of marathons at that point. But when I finished, I kept hearing it still. And I said, well, the only way that we're going to have the best that we can do is if, the best decide to run for office. And I'm not sitting here trying to say that I'm the best, but maybe I could be a person that strives to be a little bit more closer to that ideal than the people that classically enter into politics. And so what I recognized after doing an assessment was that we need as many people as possible that want to bring selflessness back to politics instead of, just looking out for your party or looking out for your political career, actually doing the thing because you want to do good for your community, regardless of how that affects your personal life or your political life. So if that means you have to sacrifice your next election in order to do something right, well, you have to be willing to do that. And I don't know how far you want to go into the story. But that's kind of why I started doing it.
Yeah, I think it's just, kind of incredible that you took that dive to step in the arena. And I think we are guilty as a country of saying, like, I mean, come on, they can't get anyone better. But, there are very few that are willing to take that leap to know how tough it is, to know that you are going to alienate people, sometimes people that are close to you, that right away, as soon as you step into that world, it's a different world. And I give you a tremendous amount of credit for taking that leap. Do you have any more political aspirations?
I don't think that I do. And to your point, it's about return. I also recognize that we need to return civility. We need civility and we need respect in politics. And so that's part of what led to, I was kind of coming at it from, it's almost like political genetics. So when you are a sprinter, for example, you have your genetics that you're born with. And that puts you kind of, if you didn't do any training whatsoever, it kind of puts you on this scale of you're up here and somebody else is down here, just based off your genetics alone. And then you can work harder and get higher and higher until until you're Usain Bolt winning gold medals. And so I kind of started with certain political genetics that I had to overcome. And these political genetics kind of were good for a general election, in that I didn't vote for Donald Trump. I was a Republican. I didn't vote for Trump in 2016. I had written in General Mattis as my vote, and that was widely known. And so, that was something I had to overcome in the primary.
Right.
And just my beliefs in general on a variety of issues, they put me a little bit more towards the center. Mm-hmm. And when you're in a primary, those hinder you, but they help you in the general election. And one thing I will say about it is, a lot of people say, well, you can't complain unless you vote, and that's true. But I would also take it one step further. I would say you can't complain unless you're willing to step into the arena. Unless you're willing to run for public office yourself, you can't complain. And I would also encourage
too. It doesn't just have to be running for Congress. I think that's such a point. Like, you have to step into the arena. You have to get involved and be a part of the solution in your community. I mean, that's step number one.
Yeah, exactly. In some capacity. Yeah, you don't have to run for president or whatever, but get involved somehow. And I will say, one way that we can get involved that I think I have recognized that has kind of put us into this position where every 4 years or 2 years we're saying this is the best we can do, is that people don't tend to participate in primaries. Because it's a party process, and most people they kind of overlook that. They vote in the general election when we have the two options, but we're not voting in the primary when there's 6, 7, 8 people that might be running for this position. And unfortunately, in the primary, everybody caters to the most stalwart team Republican or team Democrat that is running. And they all cater to that. And that's kind of what currently the people that tend to vote in primary elections, that's what they want. They want to see the guy or the girl that is just all team Republican. No, like who's the Philadelphia Eagles' biggest rival? The Cowboys? I don't know, who is it?
Cowboys.
Yeah, it's like they just want the most diehard Philadelphia Eagles fan. The other people just want the most diehard Cowboys fan. And if there's anybody that says, well, the Cowboys, that was a catch. I admit that was a catch that time.
Yeah.
And they just go, they think that you're evil. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
And so
base, just get the base out. We know that the base, we know how they're going to vote 100%. And I mean, get out there and vote. Every single person needs to get out there, and they need to become educated about our candidates. I think that's important too. Like, learn about our candidates, learn about where they stand on. Just because you're a Republican doesn't mean you line up with the Republican that's running with you in a primary. You guys are very different people, and it's so important. I always say, like, make sure that you educate yourself on each and every person you're voting for down the entire ballot.
No matter. I mean, I kind of equate it to this. Like, most people in most politically, they are kind of, it's kind of like football. So most people that watch football, they're casual football fans. They have a team that they like, but if their team doesn't win on Sunday or whatever, it doesn't ruin their week. Whereas the people that vote in primaries are a lot like Ryan Manion being a Philadelphia Eagles fan. If the Eagles lose, it ruins their week. And they're watching the draft. They're looking at the stats. They are talking about it all week, the whole season. That's the people that are selecting the nominees from both parties. So yeah, of course we're going to end up with two people that are as far left and as far right as you can get, because the only people that are selecting these two nominees are as far left and as far right as we can get. And it's kind of like if you send from the people that only vote in the general election, your wife says, I'm going to the grocery store to get dinner. She says, what do you want? And you go, I don't know, whatever, I don't care. And then she comes back with, chicken breast. And you're like, oh, chicken breast. I hate chicken breast. But she asked you what you wanted. And you didn't participate in the process of selecting what you might want to have. And so you really have no right to complain unless you participate in that process.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think even more true to that is that most of the population is the casual football fan, right? That's in so that's the group that needs to become more active. It's
because if people select the person, we'll have more normal candidates in the future, and that's one of the things I've learned. I haven't done a full assessment of the race yet, but that's one of the things I've definitely learned. And I don't have any more political aspirations, because I kind of feel like I can probably have a bigger impact going back to my wheelhouse, what I've been doing, what I'm good at, telling that story. And then I'm going to start focusing on the next generation. I'm going to be opening up a summer camp for kids in my area. And so I want to start taking all these lessons that I've learned and putting them into children's brains, so that they can kind of become the future leaders.
That's awesome. First I'm hearing of That's exciting.
Yeah, surprise.
And we definitely have to partner on that a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Manion Foundation has a program called Character Does Matter, and we actually have veterans. Rob is trained, one of our trained veteran mentors, that go out and speak to our nation's youth and share with them stories of leadership and courage and selfless service in a way to pass those character traits down to our next generation. And did I get this correct? And I'm taking this just from little tidbits off your social media. Are you writing a book as well right now?
Yeah, I've been working on my memoir probably since 2012, but I was working on it in earnest. So I wrote the first draft before announcing the run for Congress, and now that I'm not doing that anymore, I'm working on the second draft in earnest. So hopefully, next year, we'll be able to all have it released, a memoir, and then we can go on a book tour together.
Okay, that's a deal. I'm in. And lastly, I think it's important to note that we didn't really talk too much about your family in life. You talked a little bit about your wife who was with you on your journey for the 31 marathons in 31 days. You also are a new father. And what's fatherhood like for you?
It's amazing. I should say, just speak briefly about how incredible my wife is. I met her at the 2012 Paralympics. We just so happened to end up, she was rowing for Great Britain. And we just so happened to end up in the same casino bar. And I'm, just incredibly lucky that I decided to go out to that bar that night. And, I couldn't have done the month marathons without her, couldn't have done the bike ride without her, because, like I said, in the month marathon, she ran the whole operation. And, she was my most trusted confidant, in the hard times. And yeah, and she's just an amazing woman. She did a home birth here. She gave birth to Harry in our house. No pain medication. just a complete badass. 18 hours of labor. Just she came out on the couch. It's just, and she wanted to do that. From day one when she got pregnant, she's, I want to do this at home. And I was scared at first, but she brought me around just with her strength. And yeah, it's incredible. I mean, it gives you a whole new purpose. It gives me a whole other level, because I have this other person that is depending on me to be what he needs me to be at any given moment. And so that gives me, what I've also learned is the best way to overcome anything in life and accomplish anything in life is to have a selfless purpose that drives you to accomplish that, or that requires you to accomplish it. So when I have a difficulty in my life now, I can just remember that Harry and my wife are there, and they need me to get over whatever this difficulty is. And that gives you all the strength that you could possibly need. That gives a mother the ability to fight a polar bear if she has to, and win in order to defend her child. So that's what it does for me, and it's amazing.
And Harry is super cute. Recently a picture of him in his little TMF gear, and oh my gosh, he's adorable. So congratulations.
Yeah.
Rob, this has been awesome. I want to wrap our conversation up with the same question I ask each one of our guests. You told me you've been listening to the podcast, so you probably already know the question, but what does living a resilient life look like for you?
Yeah, I think I'm glad that you brought up use the weight, because that is my answer to this question. It's not just about being able to withstand a stress or withstand a challenge. It's figuring out how to absorb that challenge into you and turn it into energy and strength and accomplishment for yourself. It's how can this challenge improve my life in a different way. So that's what it would mean to me. It's use the weight. Yeah.
Use the weight, look out for the spotters, and
be willing to get a spotter. Don't be afraid to get a spotter.
Don't be afraid to be a spotter, right? Don't be afraid.
Yeah, be a spotter too. Be a spotter. Don't be afraid to ask for a spotter. Proof the lane is another thing that I like to say. When I was in Afghanistan, when I was going into a minefield with my metal detector, I was doing something called clearing the lane, making sure there wasn't an IED under the ground with my metal detector. And every time I took a step, I was proving whether or not there was an IED there by stepping on that patch of ground. If it exploded, well, there was one. And that's called proving the lane. And so what I've tried to do over the course of since my recovery is proof the lane for other people, show people what's possible, and be that person that's willing to put themselves out there, take the risk, endure the danger and the pain in order to show people what can be accomplished.
I love it. Rob, thank you so much for joining us today. Incredible conversation. And I, for one, am looking forward to what comes next. What's the next challenge, and how can I be a part of it and be involved? Because everything you do inspires me, and you definitely set the example for a lot of people around you. So thank you so much for being a guest on the Resilient Life podcast.
Thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. And really appreciate the opportunity. And as far as what's next, the book, finish that up. Do more speaking engagements. So I do speaking, public speaking, a lot like what you do, trying to continue to get the message out there, the story. And then, the summer camp. And I think we can probably partner on all three of those things. I've been wanting to talk with you about the summer camp because I know that you have the Character Does Matter program, and you're going to have a lot of people that might be able to help with that. And so those are the kind of the three things. And then obviously just being a dad and a husband to my family.
Awesome. Looking forward to it, Rob. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Resilient Life podcast. Pretty incredible story. I've been friends with Rob for a few years now, and just to hear him talk in more detail about what he went through and his path to recovery, and frankly, everything that he has gone on to do. It's pretty inspiring. And I think, for me, the biggest takeaway is this idea of using the weight to help propel you to push forward. And I think we can all apply that to our lives each and every day. And I thank Rob for being on the show. I thank you for listening. And please like, subscribe, and share the Resilient Life podcast with your friends and family. Thanks so much.